The Galactic Coalition had been watching Earth for 30 years before they decided to make contact. They had sent their invisible ships to orbit the blue planet. They had placed listening devices on the moon. They had intercepted every transmission, every broadcast, every piece of data that humans sent into space. And what they found terrified them. Ambassador of the Hegemony was the first to present his findings to the Coalition Council. They were an ancient species with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. They had lived among the stars for 10,000 years. They had seen many species rise and fall, but they had never seen anything quite like humans. "We have identified their warrior class," announced to the gathered delegates. The chamber was vast, filled with representatives from 47 different species. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no bodies at all and existed only as patterns of light. But all of them turned their attention to the holographic display that flickered to life in the center of the room. The footage showed humans in dark clothing moving through a building at night. They wore strange devices over their eyes that let them see in darkness. They carried weapons that spat fire and metal. They moved in perfect coordination, never speaking, communicating only through hand signals. In less than 3 minutes, they had killed every enemy in the building and rescued a group of prisoners. "The humans call these warriors Special Forces," explained. "They have many names for them: Navy SEALs, Delta Force, Green Berets, Rangers. Each nation has their own version, but they all share common traits." He changed the footage. Now the display showed a single human surviving alone in a frozen wilderness. The human built shelter from snow. He caught fish through ice. He walked for hundreds of miles through terrain that would kill most species in hours. "They can survive in any environment," continued. "They train for years, sometimes decades. They learn to kill with weapons, with their hands, with anything they can find. They learn languages, cultures, psychology. They can infiltrate any society. They can disappear into any population. And when they strike, their enemies never see them coming." Admiral K of the Dominion leaned forward in his seat. There were creatures with hard shells and compound eyes. They were among the most feared warriors in the galaxy. But even K felt uncomfortable watching these humans. "How many of these special forces do they have?" he asked. "Our estimates suggest approximately 70,000 across all their nations," replied. 70,000, K repeated. "That is not many." "No, but consider what each one can do. A single team of 12 operators once destabilized an entire government. Another team held a position against 500 enemies for 3 days until rescue arrived. These are not soldiers, Admiral. These are weapons in human form." The council debated for many hours. Some argued that humanity should be destroyed before they could spread beyond their world. Others suggested containment. But in the end, they decided on diplomacy. The humans had not shown aggression toward other species. Perhaps they could be reasoned with. First contact was made on a space station built specifically for the occasion. The coalition sent their finest diplomats. The humans sent politicians, scientists, and at the coalition's request, a team of their special forces. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Carter led the human military delegation. He was 42 years old with short brown hair and calm eyes. He moved quietly, like a predator that had no need to prove its strength. Behind him stood 11 other operators, men and women who had survived the most brutal training their species could devise. The alien delegates watched them with a mixture of fear and fascination. When Carter demonstrated hand-to-hand combat techniques, 3 observers had to leave the room. When his team showed their marksmanship skills, hitting targets at distances that should have been impossible, Admiral K refused to stand within 10 meters of any human for the rest of the conference. "Your warriors are impressive," said to the human ambassador during a private meeting. "We have never seen their equal." The human ambassador, a woman named Hayes, seemed confused by the statement. "They are very good at their jobs," she agreed. But we do not define ourselves by our warrior's ambassador. We are also artists, scientists, teachers, builders. Of course, said politely, but he did not believe her. No species that could create warriors like Daniel Carter could be anything other than dangerous. The coalition made a decision that day. They would welcome humanity into the galactic community. They would trade with them. They would share technology and knowledge, but they would never, ever provoke them. For 15 years, this arrangement worked. Humanity expanded into unclaimed space, establishing colonies on distant worlds. They were peaceful neighbors, trading fairly and respecting boundaries. Some coalition species even began to relax around them. But not everyone in the galaxy was part of the coalition. They had been watching too. They were conquerors, plain and simple. They stood 8 feet tall with natural armor made of chitin and bone. They had 4 arms, each ending in claws that could tear through metal. Their reflexes were faster than any known species. They had conquered 11 civilizations and enslaved billions. When they first saw the footage of human special forces, they laughed. Impressive for soft creatures, Warlord said to his war council. But they are few. What is 70,000 warriors against our endless legions? We have conquered species far more dangerous than these humans. His advisors agreed. The coalition was weak. They let fear control them. They would show the galaxy what true warriors looked like. They chose their target carefully. A small human colony called New Michigan, located on the edge of human space. 30,000 civilians. A small military garrison, far from any reinforcement. They assembled 50,000 warriors, their finest troops, their most experienced commanders. They would crush this colony quickly and completely, sending a message to both humanity and the coalition. As their fleet entered hyperspace, Warlord smiled. The humans would learn to fear just as so many others had before them. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace above New Michigan on a Tuesday morning. The colonists were just beginning their day. Farmers were heading to their fields. Children were walking to school. The morning sun was warm on the green hills that surrounded the main settlement. Then the sky turned dark with enemy ships. Coalition observers had followed the fleet. They maintained a safe distance, recording everything for their governments. Ambassador was aboard one of these ships, watching the invasion unfold on his display screens. The humans have been warned, his aide reported. But their special forces cannot arrive for at least 18 hours. The colony has only a small garrison. How small? Asked. 800 soldiers, regular infantry. Closed his eyes. He had seen what they did to populations they conquered. The humans on that planet would suffer terribly before they died. On the surface of New Michigan, Major Brooks was already moving. He was 38 years old with a thick build and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had served in the military for 16 years and had never faced anything like this. But he did not let his soldiers see his fear. "Listen up," he said to his troops as they assembled in the main square. "We have 50,000 enemy combatants incoming. Our job is to protect these civilians until ships arrive. That means we hold. No matter what comes down from those ships, we hold." Private First Class Price stood in the 3rd row. He was 19 years old and had been in the military for less than a year. His hands were shaking as he gripped his rifle. The soldier next to him, a woman named Amy Collins who served as a combat medic, noticed his fear. "First battle?" she asked quietly. "Yes." "Stay close to me. Do what the sergeant tells you. Aim for center mass." The first dropships landed an hour later. The creatures that emerged were nightmares made flesh. They towered over the human defenders, their chitinous armor gleaming in the sunlight. They carried massive weapons that fired bolts of superheated plasma. Their war cries echoed across the hills like thunder. The humans opened fire. The first wave of fell before they could take 10 steps. Human rifles cracked in rapid succession, each shot finding gaps in the alien armor. They had expected easy prey. Instead, they found defenders who did not run, who did not panic, who simply kept shooting with mechanical precision. Major Brooks moved along the defensive line, directing fire, plugging gaps, keeping his soldiers focused. When a section of the perimeter was about to be overrun, he grabbed a rifle and joined the defense himself, dropping 6 before reinforcements could arrive. "Keep firing," he shouted. "Make them pay for every meter." The battle raged for hours. They had numbers, but the humans had position. They had prepared the ground with trenches and barriers. They had placed automated guns at key points. They fought from buildings and rooftops, using every advantage the terrain offered. Private Price discovered something about himself that day. When the fighting started, his fear disappeared. His hands stopped shaking. Everything became simple and clear. There were enemies trying to kill him and the people behind him. He could not let that happen. By the 3rd hour of battle, his rifle had overheated twice. He had gone through 12 magazines of ammunition. A claw had torn a gash in his arm that Amy Collins had bandaged without him even noticing, and he had killed 31 enemy warriors. When ammunition ran low, he used his entrenching tool. It was a small folding shovel that every soldier carried. It was not designed for combat, but when it broke through the line and charged at a group of wounded soldiers, Price met the creature with nothing but that shovel and his refusal to let it pass. The alien was 8 feet tall, was 5'9". The fight lasted 11 seconds. When it ended, the was dead and was looking for his next target. Coalition observers recorded everything. They watched in stunned silence as 800 humans held against 50,000. They saw soldiers fighting with broken bones, with wounds that should have been fatal, with weapons that should have been useless against armored giants. "This is not possible," Admiral K said. He had joined the observation fleet when word of the battle spread. "These cannot be regular soldiers. They must have sent their special forces in secret." "Our scans show no special forces signatures," his aide replied. "These are standard infantry units, the 142nd Battalion. Standard infantry do not fight like this." But they did. Hour after hour, the humans held their ground. They fell back when they had to, trading space for time, but they never broke. They never ran. They kept fighting until the evacuation ships arrived and the last civilian was safely away. When Major Brooks finally gave the order to retreat, they had lost 23,000 warriors, 23,000 of their finest soldiers, killed by 800 humans who had simply refused to lose. The 142nd had lost 64. Major Brooks was the last to board the evacuation ship. He had 3 broken ribs, a bullet wound in his shoulder, and he had not slept in over 30 hours. Amy Collins forced him to sit down while she treated his injuries. "We did good today," she said quietly. "We did our job," he replied, "nothing more." On the command ship, Warlord stared at the casualty reports. He could not understand what had happened. His warriors were supposed to be unstoppable. They had conquered 11 species. They had never suffered a defeat like this. "Those were not their special forces," one of his advisors said. "Our intelligence confirms it. Those were regular human soldiers, basic infantry." I did not respond. He was remembering something Ambassador had said during a coalition meeting years ago. They had warned them about humanity. They had shown footage of human special forces and begged the galaxy to avoid war with these creatures. If those soldiers on New Michigan were just regulars, a thought, then what are their special forces capable of? For the first time in his long career of conquest, the warlord felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. News of the Battle of New Michigan spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species heard the story. 800 human soldiers had faced 50,000 warriors and won, not just survived, won. The numbers did not make sense. The outcome should have been impossible, and yet it had happened. The Coalition Council called an emergency session. Representatives from every member species crowded into the Great Chamber, all of them demanding answers. Ambassador had never seen so much fear in one place. "We must understand what happened," the representative insisted. "If regular human soldiers can do this, then everything we know about warfare is wrong." "Perhaps our intelligence was mistaken," another delegate suggested. "Perhaps those were special forces after all." "They were not," said. He had checked 3 times. He had used every intelligence source available. The soldiers on New Michigan were standard infantry. Many of them had been in service for less than 2 years. Some were teenagers. The chamber fell silent. A species of warriors who could send teenagers against veteran soldiers and win was not something any of them wanted to think about. The coalition requested a meeting with human military leadership. They needed to understand. They needed to know what kind of species they were dealing with. General Lane arrived at the coalition station 3 days later. She was 62 years old with hair and sharp eyes. She had spent most of her career behind a desk, managing logistics and personnel. She was not a warrior by any traditional definition. She was an administrator. The alien studied her carefully as she entered the meeting room. She moved slowly. She had no visible weapons. She looked like someone's grandmother. "Thank you for coming, General," Ambassador began. "We have questions about the recent battle on New Michigan." "I expected you would," Lane replied. She sat down and folded her hands on the table. "What would you like to know?" "The soldiers who fought there. We were told they were regular infantry, standard troops. Is this accurate?" "It is. The 142nd Battalion. Good soldiers, but nothing special by our standards." Admiral K leaned forward. "Nothing special. They killed 23,000 warriors. They held against impossible odds for 6 hours. In our experience, such feats require elite troops trained for decades." General Lane looked genuinely puzzled. "They made tactical errors. They underestimated our defensive preparations, and our soldiers performed their duties. That is what we trained them to do." "What training produces such warriors?" asked. "Basic training is 16 weeks, then advanced infantry training for another 8. After that, they join their units and continue learning on the job." The coalition delegates exchanged glances. 24 weeks, less than half a year. Their own elite forces trained for years, sometimes decades, before seeing combat. General Lane said carefully, "When we first contacted humanity, you showed us your special forces, Lieutenant Commander Carter and his team. We assumed they represented your ultimate warriors, your apex predators. They are among our best, yes. But the soldiers on New Michigan, they fought with similar ferocity, similar skill, similar disregard for their own safety. If they are not special forces, how is this possible?" General Lane thought about the question for a moment. She seemed to be searching for words that the aliens would understand. "Let me explain it this way," she said. "Our regular soldiers are trained to fight wars. They learn to use weapons, to follow orders, to work as a team, to complete their mission regardless of personal cost. They are very good at this. But they are still soldiers. They fight in units. They rely on support. They follow established tactics." She paused. "Our special forces are different. They are trained to end wars before they start, or to win wars that cannot be won through conventional means." "I do not understand the distinction," Kay said. "Special forces training begins after a soldier has already proven themselves exceptional in regular service. Then they undergo years of additional preparation. Survival skills that would let them live alone in any environment for months. Infiltration techniques, language acquisition, psychological warfare. They learn to operate without support behind enemy lines for extended periods." How extended? Asked. Some operations have lasted years. A single 12-man team can destabilize an entire planetary government. They can turn enemy populations against their own leaders. They can destroy infrastructure, eliminate key personnel, and create chaos on a scale that would require conventional armies millions strong to achieve. The chamber was very quiet. Even the translator devices seemed afraid to break the silence. The soldiers on New Michigan, Admiral K said slowly. The ones who killed 23,000. You are telling us they are the humans who were not good enough to become special forces. General Lane shifted slightly in her seat. I would not phrase it that way. Different skills, different roles. But yes, the soldiers in our special forces units are selected from those who have already excelled in regular service. They are the exceptional among the exceptional. Then what can a special forces team actually do? Asked. If your regular soldiers can defeat 50-1 odds, what are your elite warriors capable of? General Lane met his eyes. For a moment, the grandmother disappeared. Something older and harder looked out from behind those sharp eyes. They can do whatever is necessary, she said, and you would never see them coming. The meeting ended shortly after. The coalition delegates retreated to their ships to process what they had learned. Ambassador sat alone in his quarters, staring at the wall. He thought about every interaction he had ever had with humans, every trade negotiation, every diplomatic function, every casual conversation. He wondered how many special forces operators had been present. He wondered how many he had never noticed. They were an ancient species. They had lived among the stars for 10,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had survived wars that had destroyed entire civilizations. And now, for the first time in their long history, they had encountered something that truly frightened them. Not human weapons, not human ships, not even human special forces. What frightened them was the realization that everything they had feared about humanity was just the surface, the visible tip of something vast and terrible hiding beneath. If those soldiers on New Michigan were the ordinary ones, thought, then we have made a serious mistake in our assessment of this species. He began composing a message to his government. The needed to know, everyone needed to know. The humans were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The weeks following the Battle of New Michigan changed the galaxy forever. Species that had once considered themselves powerful now looked at their military forces with new eyes. They tripled their defensive fleets and sealed their borders. They began a massive military modernization program. 17 smaller species sent formal requests to Earth, begging for protection treaties. But they refused to accept defeat. Warlord stood before his war council in the Great Hall of there. The massive chamber was filled with the highest-ranking officers in society. All of them had heard about New Michigan. All of them were hungry for revenge. We underestimated them, admitted. We sent 50,000 warriors against 800 defenders. We expected easy victory. We were wrong. He slammed his fist against the table, cracking the stone surface. But we will not make that mistake again. The humans are strong, yes, stronger than we expected, but they are not invincible. No species is invincible. He activated a holographic display showing a blue and green world spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Earth, the human, the heart of their civilization. We will not target their colonies, announced. We will strike at Earth itself. We will assemble the largest invasion force in history, 2 million warriors, our entire war fleet, every ship, every soldier, every weapon we possess. His officers began to murmur with excitement. This was the kind of war they understood: overwhelming force, total commitment, complete destruction. The humans cannot defend against such numbers, continued. Even if every one of their soldiers fights like those on New Michigan, they cannot stop 2 million. We will drown them in our fury. We will burn their world to ash. and the galaxy will remember what happens to those who defy us." The War Council roared their approval. Within days, the mobilization began. Ships were recalled from across space. Warriors were assembled from every colony. Weapons were manufactured at unprecedented rates. The invasion fleet grew larger with each passing week. Coalition intelligence tracked every movement. Ambassador sent daily reports to his government, each one more alarming than the last. They were committed. They would not stop until Earth was destroyed or their entire species was broken. Humanity watched and prepared. Their regular military forces took defensive positions throughout their space. Civilian populations were evacuated from vulnerable colonies. The war machine that humans had hoped never to use began to wake. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, Lieutenant Commander Daniel Carter received new orders. He was 57 years old now. His hair had turned, and his body carried the scars of 30 years of operations that would never appear in any official record. He had served in places the public did not know existed. He had done things that would never be acknowledged, and he had trained a generation of operators to do the same. His orders were simple: stop the invasion, by any means necessary. Carter requested a meeting with Warlord A. He sent the request through official diplomatic channels, citing a desire to negotiate peace. The Warlord agreed, probably hoping to intimidate the humans before his final assault. They met on a neutral station at the edge of Coalition space. A brought 50 of his personal guards, massive warriors in ceremonial armor. Carter came alone. The guards watched the human carefully as he entered the meeting room. He was smaller than any of them. He carried no visible weapons. He walked slowly, without fear, and took his seat across from the warlord. "You asked for this meeting," A growled. His voice was deep and resonant, designed by evolution to intimidate prey. "Speak your piece, human." Carter reached into his pocket. Every guard in the room tensed, but all he produced was a small data chip, which he placed on the table between them. "Before we talk," Carter said calmly, "I want you to look at this." A gestured to one of his aides, who scanned the chip for threats before inserting it into a display device. Holographic information filled the air above the table. The warlord's expression changed. "This contains the locations of your 17 hidden fleet yards," Carter explained. "The ones you thought nobody knew about. It also contains the access codes to your military communications network. Current codes, updated as of this morning, and the personal schedules of every member of your War Council for the next 3 months." I stared at the data. It was accurate. Every detail was accurate. "We have had operators embedded in space for 8 years, Carter continued. "We knew about your invasion plans before you finalized them. We knew about this meeting before you agreed to it. Right now, at this moment, we have assets within walking distance of your council chambers on your—" "You are bluffing. Check the data, take your time." The warlord spent 10 minutes reviewing the information. With each passing second, his face grew darker. His guards shifted nervously. They could all see the truth in their leader's expression. "Your invasion fleet will never reach Earth," Carter said when I finally looked up. "If you launch, we will destroy your shipyards within the first 2 hours. Your communications network will go dark. Your leadership will be eliminated before your warriors even realize something is wrong." He leaned forward slightly. "By the time your fleet is halfway to Earth, the Dominion will have ceased to exist as a political entity. Your will be in chaos. Your colonies will be cut off and vulnerable, and your 2 million warriors will be stranded in space with nowhere to return to." A's claws dug into the table. "You cannot do this. You are one human. You cannot destroy an empire." "I am not one human," Carter replied. "I am one member of a team, and there are many teams. We do not fight wars, warlord. We make sure wars never happen. But if you force us to prove what we can do, there will be nothing left of your civilization to surrender." He stood up. "The choice is yours. You can launch your invasion and lose everything, or you can accept that some enemies cannot be defeated through force alone." Carter walked toward the door. He stopped just before leaving and looked back at the warlord. "I am just a soldier," he said. "I follow orders, but the people who give me orders are very patient, warlord, very patient and very thorough. They have been planning for this moment since before your grandfather was born. Think carefully about what you do next." Then he was gone. I sat alone in that room for a long time. His guards watched him, waiting for orders, but no orders came. 3 days later, the invasion fleet stood down. The ships returned to their bases. The warriors went home, and the galaxy let out a breath it had been holding for months. The war that should have destroyed Earth never happened. And nobody except a handful of humans would ever know exactly why. 10 years passed after the crisis. The galaxy changed in ways that nobody could have predicted. Old enemies became cautious neighbors. Ancient rivalries faded into memory. Species that had spent centuries fighting each other began to talk, to trade, to build something new together. And at the center of it all stood humanity. They had not conquered anyone. They had not demanded tribute or territory. They had simply continued being what they had always been: farmers and scientists, artists and engineers, teachers and builders. They spread across the stars not as conquerors but as neighbors, and somehow that made them more influential than any empire in galactic history. Ambassador stood before the Coalition Council for the last time. He was old now, even by standards. His blue skin had faded to pale, and his movements were slow and careful. But his mind was still sharp, and his voice still carried across the great chamber. "I have served this council for 60 years, he said. "I have seen wars and treaties. I have watched species rise and fall, and I have spent the last 25 years trying to understand humanity." He paused, looking around at the gathered delegates. The chamber was fuller than ever. New species had joined the coalition in the past decade, drawn by the promise of peace and prosperity. Many of them had come because of humanity. "When we first encountered them, we were afraid," continued. "We saw their warriors and assumed they were predators. We saw their weapons and assumed they were conquerors. We expected them to behave as every other powerful species has behaved throughout history." He smiled slightly. "We were wrong." The human delegation sat in their usual place near the center of the chamber. There were diplomats and scientists among them, cultural attaches and trade representatives. But's eyes were drawn to a few familiar faces in the group. Major Brooks sat in the second row. He was retired now, serving as a military advisor to the human delegation. His hair had gone completely, and he walked with a slight limp from an old injury. But his eyes were still steady, still watchful, still ready. Next to him sat Dr. Amy Collins. She had left the military years ago to pursue xenobiology. Her research on physiology had led to medical advances that saved thousands of lives. She still kept in touch with her old unit, still visited the memorial for those who had fallen on New Michigan. In the back of the human section, a young man was explaining something to a group of students. Price had become a teacher after his military service. He taught history at a joint human-alien academy, helping young people from different species understand each other. His students did not know about New Michigan. They did not know that their friendly, patient teacher had once killed 31 enemy warriors with a rifle and a shovel. They only knew that he made them feel safe. "Humans do not create warriors because they love war," said. "They create warriors because they love peace, because they understand that peace must be protected. Their regular soldiers fight because they must. Their special forces exist so that others do not have to fight at all." He looked directly at the human delegation, at Captain Daniel Carter, who was preparing for his own retirement after 35 years of service, at General Lane, who had become the public face of human military diplomacy, at all the ordinary people who had somehow become extraordinary. We called your special forces monsters, said. We shuddered at your regulars. But in the end, we discovered that the most terrifying thing about humanity is not your capacity for violence. He paused, letting the silence build. It is your capacity for restraint. You could have conquered us all. You had the power. You had the opportunity. After the crisis, there was no force in the galaxy that could have stopped you. And instead of taking everything, you chose to be our friends. Captain Carter rose from his seat. He was 67 years old now, and his body was tired from decades of carrying burdens that nobody else could see. But he stood straight, and his voice was clear when he spoke. Ambassador, he said, we never wanted to frighten anyone. We just wanted to protect our home, our families, the things we love. He looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces watching him. Now our home is a little bigger, that is all. The council chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, the delegates began to applaud. It was a human custom that had spread throughout the coalition over the past decade, a way of showing approval and appreciation without words. The sound filled the chamber like rolling thunder. Species that had once been enemies clapped alongside species they had once preyed upon. Old hatreds dissolved in that moment, washed away by something stronger. Watched it happen with tears in his ancient eyes. He had spent his whole life studying humanity, trying to understand what made them different. And now, at the end of his career, he finally had his answer. Humans were not special because they were stronger than other species. They were not special because they had better weapons or superior tactics. They were special because they refused to let their strength define them. They could have been tyrants. They could have ruled the galaxy through fear. Instead, they built schools and hospitals. They shared their technology freely. They welcomed strangers into their homes and treated them as family. The most dangerous warriors in the galaxy had chosen to be teachers. The most feared soldiers had become healers. The species that could have destroyed everything had decided to protect it instead. That was the truth the galaxy had discovered about humanity. Not that they were dangerous, although they certainly were. Not that they were powerful, although their power was beyond question. But that they were good. Genuinely, sincerely, stubbornly good. After the ceremony, Brooks and Amy Collins stood together on an observation deck, watching the stars. "Do you ever think about New Michigan?" she asked. "Every day," he replied. "I think about the ones we lost, the ones we saved, the kids who grew up because we held that line. Was it worth it?" Brooks was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the young private who had fought beside him that day. The teenager with the shovel who was now teaching alien children about human history. He thought about the colony that had been rebuilt, the families that had returned, the life that had continued because 800 soldiers had refused to give up. "Look at this," he said, gesturing at the stars. 20 years ago, half these species were afraid of us. Now they send their children to our schools. They invite us into their homes. They call us friends." He smiled. Yeah, it was worth it. In the darkness between stars, peace had taken root. It was fragile, imperfect, and required constant protection. But it was real, and it had been paid for by soldiers who understood that the greatest victory was not the battle you won, but the war you prevented. The galaxy had learned to stop shuddering at humans. Instead, they had learned to stand beside them. And together, they built something that would last.